I'll tell you about Ethereum smart contracts. And basically, Ethereum is a distributed database and distributed in a weird way. It stores the same data on all computers. The good thing about Ethereum is that it's not a database for data, but it's also a database for code. You can write a code and store in Ethereum. The code is called smart contract, and a smart contract is basically a number of functions and some place to store some data. But you can't randomly change this data once you already uploaded it to Ethereum. You can only change this data according to functions you wrote when you uploaded this code to Ethereum. So when you need to change your smart contract data, you just create a transaction which do changes according to function, and it's simply like calling this function. One good thing about smart contracts is well, people imagination, and people just invite very funny way to use smart contracts. They decided that we can use smart contracts to kind of create our own currency. And how it works? Basically, we create a smart contract which has some mapping in data. Mapping from addresses to value. And it says that some address have some amount of tokens or some amount of this currency. And yes, then everybody can create transactions which change this mapping according to our functions. And we can write very interesting things. We can write basic things like, for example, if I create a transaction to Ethereum which works according to a mid function. This function basically adds some value to my balance. And we can transfer these tokens, or we can do other stuff. If you want to learn more about this, you can go to Ethereum.org. They have good tutorials, and yeah, you will end up written your own token, your own currency. And you even can launch ICO. And if you launch ICO, come to Belarus, because it's actually legal to do it in Belarus. Thank you.
Thank you. So, hi. Some months ago, I had an idea which I actually used in a project, and just wanted to quickly present it. So it's not a jam or anything. It's just a technique I used to do some stuff. So I had this bus, and I wanted to drive it. I'm just kidding. So essentially what it is, in my previous talk I talked about commands and events, but I haven't talked, there is a funny way to decouple things. What do I mean? Well, this is just a small code example which says, okay, this is how do we register things or command handlers to handle commands? So you just build something like this. It's very simple. You add stuff to the registry, and you can fetch stuff from registry. For events, it's the same, except events can be handled by multiple handlers, as opposed to commands, which can be handled by just a single one. So it's a thread-safe thing. So how? We have a registration phase, which happens at boot time. So before we boot our application, we register all of our command handlers, like this, and all of our event handlers, like this. This is just an example. And then we have execution phase. So in order to handle a command, we just said, okay, bus command, please handle my command. Or we want to handle an event, and it's the same thing. Bus event, please handle my event. Why? Because coupling. Handlers are registered in boot time. Publisher needs not know what, if anything, will handle the message. just tell the bus to handle it. Handlers do not care where the message is coming from, and interacting parties are completely decoupled. Is this a good idea? I don't know. It's a pattern. It's used sometimes. But if you have an opinion, please tell me. Here. Thank you very much.
So I was talking about refinements, and I started to show some use cases when you might be willing to use it. So I already talked about dependency reduction examples. So the next thing I was started talking about, but I was stopped. So it's a kind of modernization. So if you want to use some features that are not available in older Rubies, or maybe in older versions of frameworks you want to integrate with, you can do this simple trick. But let's go further. Next example is a kind of perfect privacy. So in Ruby, private keyword actually doesn't make your code private, so safe from invoking from other places. So you always can do something like send, and that's it. But with refinement, you can actually do that. I don't know when you need it, but that's a kind of feature of refinements. Well, the most common use case is to build DSLs using refinements to pollute global namespace, but just within the one file. That's an example from Gem called kind of pattern match thing. So it's people always try to build Elixir from Ruby. One more example from one of my gems. So that's just a syntax trigger to convert our lambdas to procs, and everyone knows that lambda and proc are two different things, yeah. And there's very subtle differences, and sometimes we don't want to care about it and use only procs. And of course, a lot of syntax sugar could be possible with refinements. And actually, just kind of pro tip, you can use information about activated models with refinements. It is the models which I included with using keyword. I don't know why you need it, but that's a feature of the language we have, but almost no one know about it. And just as a quick bonus, I guess most of you heard about Truffle Ruby, yet another promising implementation, and it supports refinements already. So that's a sign that refinements will be in the language for a long time, I think, because otherwise I don't see why they decided to waste time on it. And of course, refinements had some problems. Well, let me show just a few of them. Well, there are a lot of kind of tickets in the Ruby issue tracker, which are not exactly bugs, but strange behaviors. In some conditions, refinements do not behave as people expect. And there are some interesting API problems. So that's an example that refinement is activated when you use send, but it's not activated when you use public send. That's kind of weird thing. So do know that, and if you use refinements. And there are, of course, problems with other implementations. For example, with JRuby, the behaviors. Sometimes you need to, look for workarounds if you want to use refinements. But overall, they work fine. That's all at the end of my talk. I know I got a minute. Okay. And I want to tell you about another project of mine, which is called GemCheck. And actually, all the stuff about refinements is part of this broader project. That's a collection of kind of tips for, first of all, for Gem offers. So, including this tip with monkey patching. I don't know how to open browser there, so sorry. Please go to that page and find it. I'll share a link later. So it's a kind of checklist which I built according to my own experience, which helps me to write better software for developers. So it's not for writing commercial applications, but for writing gems for other developers. Make it easy to use these gems to extend them and whatever. There are some crucial properties that I think every gem should have. Almost no gems that have all of them, even my gems. Of course, I don't follow all these rules, but that's my attempt to I don't know, to help others to build better software. There are a lot of useful links to useful tools which helps you to do better documentation, better linting tools, and etc. So that's it. And since I have 1 second, thank you and goodbye.
Okay, please raise your hand if you feel like you're being distracted from your real work too often. Okay, and please now raise your hand if you are the person who distracts yourself by browsing Twitter, doing irrelevant stuff. Okay, great. Have you heard that distractions make you actually dumber than being stoned? No, so now you know. Okay, so I want to tell you how to become smart again. So I tried to eliminate distractions, but I couldn't. So I found a way to contain them. And here's how. So can I have my sandwich? If there's one thing you remember from this talk, this is sandwich, okay? Offline sandwich. Offline sandwich. Now we can go or stay and remember this workflow. Okay, so first offline, then online, and third step, off topic. So it's a way to organize your workday, then repeat. It's like, let's say, a round. You would have like 4 rounds, let's say, a day, where first you work on your real job. You put your headphones on, okay? You turn off your Slack, you turn off your phone, your boss cannot call you. You do the real job, like let's say 1 hour or 90 minutes. This is the time where you can code, where you can actually investigate some stuff. Then, when you're done, you enter the online phase or round, where you can actually communicate with your colleagues. You can check what they wrote to you, you can write them what you are doing, and you actually should do it. So this is the focus phase, and this is the defocus phase, because sometimes the problem is you're focused too much, and you only see this formatting problem, and you can be a little deluded sometimes. Then, off-topic phase, the best phase, you can browse Twitter, you can go for a coffee. I suggest like, let's say 30 minutes for online phase, and whatever you think is right for off-topic phase. And then repeat, so you can already see the sandwich somewhere. Okay, so does it make sense? A little bit. And I can actually say that it brought my brain back to phase where I felt it has some more capacity, because like when you're being distracted all the time, you actually feel dumber. At least this was my feeling. Oh, there's still 2 minutes. So let's continue. Okay, another way to call it would be like immersion-driven workflow. So you actually immerse yourself in such offline phase. No one can see you. Immerse like going underwater. Or you can call it like put yourself into a little jail for some time. Yeah. And now you do the work, you cannot escape. And the goal would be at the beginning of the offline phase to know what you want to do, establish the plan. Yeah. Put it on paper or whatever, and try to accomplish something during the phase. So a commit or a write-up why you don't want to do it, or like the result of the investigation. So don't just quit when the time is over, just try to accomplish something. And then you get the instant gratification, which is the primary reason that we look for distractions. Still 1 minute, okay. But it might not work in your work environment. It works best if you got remote work environment. It works even better if you're asynchronous. And it works best if you got remote, asynchronous, and autonomy when it comes to your work. So you might go to your boss and convince him to do all of that. So that's it. Thank you.
So in this lightning talk, I want to take a little step back and talk about Ruby standard library. And I decided to go through it and find and see what I can find there. And here are some of my findings. So, for example, you have abbrev class, which lets you to find abbreviations for a bunch of strings that are not ambiguous. This is obviously a very useful thing, and you have it with every Ruby distribution out there. Next thing is matrix. This might be a bit more useful. So just for regular operation on matrices, just like you would expect to every language to have, maybe not in standard library, but Ruby has it. Then primes, again some math. And you can find, well, like some prime in sequence, or you can make prime divisions. That's all also a thing you got right away with your Ruby distribution. Okay, but let's talk about some more interesting things. So there is 3 actually classes: DBM, SDBM, and GDBM. They differ by internal implementation only, so you need to get to the docs and find out what are the differences. But in general, it's embedded key value store for strings. So, for example, if you have huge hash of strings as keys as values, you can offload it to disk and forget about it, let garbage collector handle it, free up some memory, and when you're ready to work on it again, you can load it and, for example, print what's in there. So this is what you would expect, because this is exactly what you written in the beginning. So this is also for free. Next thing is pstore. This is a bit more complex stuff, because pstore lets you save a hierarchy of objects with their states, etc. So I didn't include the implementation of state class, but you can imagine this is some states with a name connected to other states via some named labels, and you can create all this world and then open pstore, and under the key start, because why not, write the entry point, the first state, the starting state. And again, you can, for example, stop the script and come back later at some point and just read it. And everything you did was there, and you can still have all this hierarchy up and running. Of course, it does not work for literally everything, but everything that can be marshaled using Ruby standard marshalling can be saved and retrieved. Another thing is distributed Ruby. This is a bit more complicated, but really cool. You actually create a class, an object, and expose it via the Ruby protocol to the outside world. So in separate process, you can connect to it and just change its instant variables, call methods, whatever you want. There is option parser, which is for parsing options from CLI, and this is quite convenient, more than environment variables. And of course, there's much more. For example, topological sorting of directed graphs and finding strongly connected components. That's also Ruby standard library. So if you have some time, go there, read it. Maybe you will find some use case for them. I don't know. I haven't. Thanks.
All right. So I wanted to show you how I play games with Ruby. So first, show of hands. How many of you actually own a desktop computer? Okay. How many of you play games? Not on the desktop computer, but in general? Okay, cool. So it all started with I wanted to play Black and White 2 on my desktop computer, and it was running Windows 10, and nothing worked. So first I tried to just install the game in Windows 10. Didn't work because it needed an emulation layer to combat piracy, and that has been removed in Windows 10. So it needed Windows 8, and I didn't want to install that on my computer. So then I tried to install the game inside VMware Workstation because it can emulate the GPU. Didn't work either because it lagged, and it's an emulation layer, so that was probably why. Oops. So then I complicated the whole setup. I installed QEMU, and I used 2 different graphics cards. I used 2 networks cards and 2 screens. And that worked. So in Linux, there's something called PCI pass-through, and it's using the VFIO driver, and that basically says, these graphics cards, I want to put this driver into it, and that tells the operating system to leave it alone. That means that when you actually plug that in, Linux won't try to display anything on them, and it tells it, maybe I want to use this for emulation. So basically what you can do is that you can have a lot of different graphics cards. So some of the CPUs actually come with little graphic cards in it. You can run Linux on that. And then you can actually have 2 keyboards or 3 keyboards, 3 mouses, and then you can actually start playing games inside of multiple guest operating systems, but you can still use the same main board. So this is how I run my stuff. There's a lot of stuff here. So basically, you want to do the clock. Apparently, in virtual machines, makes the computer lag. So you want to use the real clock for that. You want to put in all the USB devices. You want to tell. You can see the device VFIO PCI. You want to tell them which graphic cards to use, and in the end, you want to just say, use this Steam disk down here, and that's why I have all my games on. And this becomes very unmanageable very quickly, because you're kind of like, oh, I need a new virtual machine. So what do? Oh, you just copy the bash file and then you run it somewhere else. And then at some point when you buy a new USB device, like this, I use all of this. All of them have the keyboard, but sometimes I want to use my headset, sometimes I want to use my goggles, sometimes I want to record something, so I have to, I'm attending a meeting, so I want to use my microphone, sometimes I want to plug in my control for my drone, and so I want to have a standard way of doing this. So I was thinking, that's not enough. I don't want to just use puts and gets into the Ruby command line, because I want to try something new. It's 30 years old. I use cursors, and I thought, okay, it's good enough for the standard library in Ruby, so it's good enough for me. And then I can use something cool like easy. But no, it was removed from the standard library. So I had to go in and find the gem and put that in. But it actually worked. So you can do like this. You can start the cursors interface. You can do all this kind of stuff. You can see I put the cursor here and I write this stuff, and it works. But it's very annoying to work with. 30 years old. It uses YX, and even in the documentation here it says XY. Here you have the window. The windows uses X and Y for columns and lines, but the whole this thing where you actually ask how much is available in your terminal, it uses columns and lines. What? Come on, just maybe make a wrapper or something like that. But no, this is what you have to deal with. Attribute off says that it turns an attribute, turns on an attribute. An attribute on says it turns it off. What? And it actually works as you expect. So I don't know who wrote this.
So yesterday we had an example of heavy application in Rails. So I replicated that. So we have a list of 100 products and with some ratings. So actually we can see that the page loads 300 milliseconds. So it's heavy, right? So what we have here? So we have a standard products controller with a limit of 100 products. We have a template that we display product name, product, and fancy stars from product rating. In product rating, we have in product we have this method that calculates the average rating for each product. So looks like a legit Ruby code. So what's wrong with that? So let's take a peek under the hood. So I refresh the page, and whoa, what's going on? Yeah, and that's the reason of the slowness. So first we load the somewhere here. I hope you see everything clearly. So we select the 100 products, and then on the view we for each row on the table we execute 2 queries. So first we check if there are any product reviews. If there are, then we calculate the average. So wow. So what we can do about this? So let's take a look at some SQL. I hope you like it. So the classic approach is to like select product name, then the round of average of product reviews dot rating, cast to integer. From product joins product reviews on the ID columns, group by product ID, order by the average rating, and limit 10. So what this query returns is the 10 top-rated products from the table. So I have a data set of have here some stats. So I have 2,000 products, 2,000 users, and generated some random reviews. We have 300,000 reviews in the database. So this query works fine, executes 140 milliseconds. So we can go better. So we can use a common table expression, which is available from Postgres 8.4 and on. I don't know if any older version supports it. So first we calculate like virtual table of the average ratings. Then we create this join and with the limit. So the time is a bit better, 99 milliseconds. So it's like 2/3 of the first query. But we can use another technique which is available from Postgres 9.3 and on, which is lateral join. So here we have we select from products table, and we write a lateral call in which we like simulate the join. So we select the product ID and average rating from product reviews, where there's the alias, so PR is product reviews, where the product ID on product reviews equals the product ID, which refers to the outer table. And then we order by the rating and limit. The time is similar to the previous query, but that's not the end of the story. So because we don't use any filtering on. Oh my God! So when we use filtering, so classic approach, we are better 47 milliseconds. With the common table expression, there is no difference because the calculation of averages is made up front, so it takes the whole time. But with lateral, we dropped into 5 milliseconds. So the conclusion is that after the optimization, the page load is 37 milliseconds. Thank you.